From the New York Times, it's The Headlines. I'm Tracy Mumford. Today's Monday, December 16th. Here's what we're covering. Donald Trump and his allies have been issuing a flurry of legal threats, apparently aimed at intimidating news outlets over their coverage of the president-elect and of his proposed cabinet members. This October, Trump sued CBS News over how it edited a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. Just before Election Day, a lawyer for Trump accused the New York Times of publishing 3 articles that were, quote, deceptive, and demanded a retraction and an apology. The bar for public figures to win defamation cases in the U.S. is extremely high, but even filing or just threatening to file a suit can pay off. This Saturday, ABC News said it had agreed to settle a defamation suit that Trump brought after one of its anchors inaccurately said Trump was held liable for rape in a civil trial. In fact, he was found liable for sexual abuse. The settlement followed months of Trump publicly attacking ABC News, going so far as to suggest it should lose its federal broadcast license. Some legal and media experts now wonder if the settlement could embolden Trump and others to intensify their assaults on the media even more. Beyond Trump himself, his pick for Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has also been warning journalists about potential lawsuits. Hegseth's lawyer warned Vanity Fair and The New Yorker that articles they were planning to publish about his past, including drinking and marital problems, could be defamatory. Hegseth has denied having a drinking problem. Both outlets still publish the stories. Once in the White House, Trump and his team will have more powers at their disposal. They've discussed issuing subpoenas for news organizations, prosecuting journalists and their sources, and cutting funding for public media. Just over a week after the dictator Bashar al-Assad was thrown out of power, a crucial question has been hanging over Syria. How will the rebels who took power actually run the country? The group that ousted Assad, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, used to have ties to the Islamic State and al-Qaeda, but then grew more moderate. My colleague Neil McFarquhar has been looking at the small chunk of the country that the groups controlled in recent years for clues about how it may approach running all of Syria.
Around 2016, they broke with these extremist groups entirely and set up a government of their own that was still conservative in terms of enforcing Islamic law, but not brutal. They were much more pragmatic. I mean, things like alcohol was not for sale, but they didn't enforce punishments like whipping for, adultery or getting your hand chopped off if you were convicted of being a thief. And the core of the group focused on creating an army while they also set up a civil administration that kind of ran day-to-day life in the territory. They collected taxes, they set up distribution of electricity and water and cell phone service. So they managed to create a certain stability within the region. At the same time, there was an authoritarian element to the administration because they jailed their critics. There were often protests about the harsh conditions in jails. And of course, there's always a lingering suspicion that because their roots are in, the more extremist jihadist groups, that somewhere bubbling beneath the surface, that ideology might still emerge. Although one analyst I talked to suggested that, they should be judged on the last 8 years when they kind of ran a pragmatic administration rather than the previous 5 when they had been a jihadist organization.
The Senate Labor Committee, led by Bernie Sanders, has released an investigation it says shows Amazon ignored recommendations from its staff about how to keep its warehouse workers safe. The committee got access to an internal Amazon study that looked at its productivity quotas. For instance, how many items workers are expected to pick off shelves. It found that higher quotas led to higher rates of injuries and recommended relaxing enforcement of the quotas. That didn't happen. The investigation found evidence suggesting senior executives at the company rejected the recommendation because they were worried it would lower productivity. In response to the Senate's findings, an Amazon spokeswoman said the investigation was highlighting out-of-date research. A later report Amazon conducted disputed the link between quotas and injuries and determined that some workers were just more prone to getting injured. The Senate investigation also found the company discourages injured workers from getting appropriate medical care outside the warehouse. It sends them to on-site facilities that only offer basic first aid. Amazon has also denied that claim.
Oh! Stop! Phones away! Stop!
The Times has been looking at a troubling trend in American schools. Cell phones and social media are making fights between students more common and more violent.
Students are having a quarrel, and then 30 kids take their phones out, and the kids who are having a verbal spat then feel the pressure to save face, and they start physically assaulting one another because the cameras are out. And then you have kids trying to rush out of their classroom down the stairs to watch it, film it, comment on it, and share it. And it becomes a kind of reinforcing, negative, vicious cycle.
My colleague Natasha Singer has reviewed hundreds of videos that kids have posted from schools all over the country and talked to administrators, teachers, and students. She says fights at school are not a new problem by any means, and posting fights to social media isn't even new either. There are even dedicated accounts that show nothing but school fights. But she says it's gotten worse in the past few years. Students are more attached to their phones than ever, and there's been a rise in emotional issues and aggression after pandemic lockdowns. Fights and the videos of them have been surging, and schools are having trouble keeping up.
We found that students are moving to much more private channels, that they are using iMessage to text each other the fight videos. They're using AirDrop to send kids in schools the location of the fight or where they plan to assault someone. And then they're sharing it via text message, or they're sharing the videos via Snap. And so it makes it much harder for teachers and school administrators and school police officers to stop the fights, because all of this stuff is now happening much more underground than it was. The consequences are not just immediate, right? The fights live on the phones, and it becomes part of school culture. The kids ask each other, do you have the video? They watch the videos together. They post comments on the videos, which can further humiliate the victim. And then they keep them around for a while. So when there's another fight, you can compare today's fight to the video of the fight 3 months ago or 3 years ago. And it never goes away. And so it has, in a sense, made certain students feel less safe in school. It really detracted from learning. And many school administrators and teachers we spoke to said they felt like it made it much, much harder for them to do their jobs because it took time away from operating the school and teaching in the classroom.
And finally, when you buy a sealed pack of trading cards, whether it's Pokemon cards, baseball cards, there's supposed to be an air of mystery to it. You don't know what's inside. There could be a super valuable rare card, or it could be something that you've already got 20 of. Now, one company is offering a way to take some of the guesswork out, and it could disrupt the whole industry. Industrial Inspection and Consulting in Michigan realized it could use the CAT scan machinery it normally uses on machine parts to peer behind the trading card packaging. It's probably not the first to come up with the idea, but it is the first to widely advertise the service. Collectors and sellers can now scan their inventory to help figure out whether there's something in the pack worth ripping it open for, or whether they can safely sell it on to someone else, knowing they're not missing out. One of my colleagues at The Athletic went to see the process in action. It costs $650 to scan a case of cards. Considering cases can be worth thousands of dollars, some argue the investment's worth it. The scan can show rough outlines of things like jersey numbers or other identifying marks. But some trading card enthusiasts think it's morally questionable to then sell a pack after you've scanned it. Like selling a lottery ticket you know for sure won't win. Those are the headlines. Today on The Daily, how Pete Hegseth's fight to become defense secretary could be derailed by one senator. That's next in the New York Times audio app, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Tracy Mumford. We'll be back tomorrow.